The largest tree on Earth is growing where it shouldn't be. Its home is California. It survived the Ice Age, logging, and decades of drought. But in just 2 years, wildfires wiped out 1 in every 5 mature giant sequoias. Meanwhile, Scotland is home to 6 times more giant sequoias than remain in their native range. And nobody planned any of it. It all began in 1863, when one American planted a handful of sequoias beside his Scottish estate. What started as a status symbol turned out to be the salvation of an entire species. The giant sequoia is the largest tree on Earth by volume. General Sherman in Sequoia National Park contains over 1,400 cubic meters of wood. The oldest confirmed individual is 3,200 years old. If you have never stood next to a giant sequoia, the numbers alone make it difficult to picture. The bark is soft and fibrous. You can punch it with your fist and feel no pain. Under a large tree, it is always dark, even at noon on a sunny day, the crown so wide it closes off the sky. The smell is distinctive, a mixture of earth, resin, and something ancient that is hard to describe but easy to remember. These trees are unlike anything else. Their range spans 420 kilometers along the slopes of the Sierra Nevada in California, the only place on Earth where they grow naturally, or grew. IUCN classifies Sequoiadendron giganteum as an endangered species. Fewer than 80,000 trees remain in California. At the same time, Forestry England estimates the number of giant sequoias and their close relatives, the coastal redwoods in the United Kingdom, at 500,000. Trees planted for status by Victorian landowners have become the largest backup population of the species outside its native range, through accident, multiplied by time. To understand how this became possible, you have to go to Scotland, specifically west of Glasgow, to the valley of Strath Ichaig, and look at an avenue of trees that is 160 years old. One such place sits west of Glasgow in the narrow valley of Strath Ichaig. There stands an avenue of trees planted in 1863. Wealthy landowners planted these trees as a status symbol, the largest tree on Earth in one's own estate. James Duncan, a prosperous American and owner of Benmore Estate, planted 50 of them along the approach avenue in 1863. Of those 50, one fell in a storm in 1968. The other 49 still stand and are still growing. The tops of all of them are conical and pointed. A sequoia with a rounded crown is a sequoia that is slowed down. A sharp cone means one thing: the tree has not yet thought about stopping. On the sequoia's timescale, these 160 years are adolescence. In California, they live for 3 millennia. The trees at Benmore have barely begun. That is the proof of concept. People who walk into the avenue tend to fall silent. That is what visitors and the gardeners themselves describe. 350 meters where the trunks stand shoulder to shoulder like the columns of a cathedral, the sky between them sealed off, and the only sound your own footsteps. The bark is soft and fibrous to the touch, nothing like what you expect from the largest tree on the planet. For a sequoia that will live 3 millennia, this is still the very beginning. They have not even had time to develop the characteristic widening of the base that in mature Californian trees reaches 9 meters in diameter. And it is precisely at this moment, when everything looks like a quiet, unremarkable victory, that something goes wrong. In 1929, the estate came under the management of the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh. The avenue became part of an official botanic garden, with a team of horticulturists, regular monitoring, and annual visitors. The trees continued to grow, decade after decade. In 1929, the estate passed to the management of the Royal Botanic Garden, Edinburgh, and the avenue became an official botanic garden. In 1987, the garden was awarded listed garden status, recognition that it is a site of national significance. By that time, the trees were already over 40 meters tall and still growing. New visitors came every year. Every year, the trees added height. Nobody was particularly troubled by any of this. October 2019. Peter Baxter, curator of Benmore Botanic Garden, notices something wrong with the trees. Leaves are yellowing at the wrong time. The bark on several trunks is showing changes that have not appeared before. Baxter calls in external consultants, and they begin with the simplest step: taking soil samples the full length of the avenue and sending them to a laboratory. Simultaneously, they take samples of bark, branches, and foliage and test for pathogens. This is not a single analysis. It is a full diagnostic of an organism that is 160 years old. The results come back several weeks later. The picture is uncomfortable. Decades of tourist traffic have compacted the soil beneath the avenue so severely that it has almost stopped conducting oxygen and nutrients to the roots. Soil density is at a level that makes normal root growth impossible, and moisture levels are at a point where the roots find themselves in an anaerobic environment, meaning an environment without oxygen. The roots are literally suffocating. Dr. Catherine Hayden, mycologist at RBGE, formulates the conclusion: waterlogging simultaneously creates an environment for pathogens and increases the vulnerability of the trees through stress. The condition of the Benmore sequoias clearly points to root problems. But there is one further fact that makes the situation more complicated. Baxter looks at Benmore's weather records going back to 1931 and sees that 4 of the 10 wettest years in its recorded history fell within the last decade. The climate of Western Scotland is becoming wetter, and this means that even if the team solves the current problem, the situation could repeat itself in 10 years. The problem is structural, not a one-off. Trees that had just turned 160 years old found themselves under threat from the very thing that had made their growth possible: from water. Between October 2019 and February 2021, RBGE goes through a year of preparation. First, a detailed report from the external consultants with recommendations. Then, internal discussions about how to proceed. The option of hiring a contractor is dismissed immediately, expensive, and the team would not be left with the necessary skills. Instead, RBGE makes the decision that will define the entire process going forward: train their own horticulturists and purchase the equipment themselves. The procurement list: a compressor, a geo-inject lance, an air spade, a mixing unit. February 2021. The team goes out to the avenue for the first time with the new equipment. Geo-injection works like this: a specialist probe is inserted into the soil to a depth of up to half a meter, and a mixture of compressed air and nutrient solutions is pumped in under pressure. The air literally blows open the compacted structure from the inside, creating micropores, restoring drainage, and opening space for root growth. In parallel, the air spade drives vertical channels to greater depth. Without a single shovel, without any mechanical damage to the root system, which may extend several meters down. Then comes organic biostimulation. A mixture of microorganisms and nutrients is introduced into the created channels, triggering microbial activity and returning living structure to the soil. In essence, the team is restoring the soil's ability to breathe from the inside, not from above. Meter by meter, the full length of the avenue. The work is slow. One pass of the geo-injector takes several minutes at each insertion point, and there are hundreds of such points along the full avenue. The team works in sections, returns to treated areas for additional injections, and monitors soil density and moisture between sessions. By the time of the latest report, 7,250 square meters had been treated. Vegetation around the trees was changed to reduce further waterlogging. The next phase is the construction of a central drainage blanket beneath the entire avenue, which will permanently redistribute the water balance. This is the first time anyone has developed and executed an engineering solution of this scale in order to keep the largest tree on Earth alive in a climate where it was not born, but where it is needed. No precedent for this existed before. March 2024. The journal Royal Society Open Science publishes a study that did not exist 170 years ago. In all the time since the first sequoias took hold in British soil, no one had ever measured exactly how they grow. Not because nobody was interested, simply because there had been no sufficiently precise method. Felling a tree to weigh it was not an option, and external measurements of height and girth gave too coarse a picture. They were growing, and that had been considered enough. Now a method existed. A team led by Ross Holland of UCL and Professor Matt Disney brought terrestrial laser scanners to 3 sites: Benmore in Scotland, Wakehurst in Sussex, and Havering in Essex. The instrument stands on the ground and sends out millions of laser pulses in every direction. Each pulse reflects off the surface of a tree and returns with a precise travel time. From this data, a computer builds an exact 3-dimensional model of each tree, trunk, branches, ramifications, without a single cut and without any harm to the tree. 97 trees. For the first time in history, precise volume, precise biomass, precise annual growth increment for each of them. And crucially, the scanners can be brought back in 5 or 10 years and provide a new point of comparison. The result was better than anyone had expected. The trees at Benmore and Wakehurst are growing at the same rate as sequoias of comparable age in California, up to 150 kilograms of new biomass per year. A single tree absorbs on average 85 kilograms of carbon annually. Havering lagged, there are fewer rainfall there and the surrounding forest is denser. We found that the UK's redwoods are well adapted and capable of accumulating large amounts of carbon, said Holland. Professor Disney was more cautious. Right now, these trees are probably more important for their aesthetic and historical interest than for solving the climate crisis. But as their numbers grow, we need to know how they will develop. The first point on a graph that will run for 1,000 years. 3 moments: 2019, 2021, and 2024. The team at Benmore battles water. Scientists measure growth for the first time. New planting sites are being established in Wales and England. Why does any of this matter? The answer comes from California. The giant sequoia and fire are an evolutionary partnership tens of thousands of years old. The tree's cones are serotinous, sealed under normal conditions and opening only from heat. Fire clears the forest litter, exposing mineral soil for seed germination. The sequoia did not merely survive fires, it reproduced because of them. It was a strategy that worked for millennia, but the fires of 2020 and 2021 exceeded anything that strategy could have prepared the species for. A century of fire suppression in California had accumulated an unprecedented volume of fuel in the forests. The drought of 2012 to 2021, the driest documented period in California's entire instrumental history, desiccated that fuel to extreme levels, and then everything ignited. August 2020. The Castle Fire enters the groves of Sequoia National Forest. When the fire stopped, USGS scientist Nathan Stevenson and National Park Service ecologist Nancy Stevenson received data from the first aerial surveys. Castle Fire had destroyed between 31 and 42% of all large giant sequoias within its own fire perimeter. Across the entire native range, between 10 and 14% of the global population. In numbers, between 7,500 and 10,600 trees with trunk diameters greater than 120 centimeters. In a single season, in a single fire. The scale of the losses did not become clear immediately. The first aerial data gave a picture from above, but what had happened at ground level, among the trunks, nobody knew. Then Sue Keg, a conservationist living directly within Alder Creek Grove, walked the entire grove on foot with a GPS receiver in her hands. Tree by tree, she recorded each one, alive, dead, damaged. That fieldwork became the basis of the official USGS report. Without it, the numbers would not have existed at all. One of the most precise documents on the scale of the catastrophe begins with one person walking through a burned forest and writing down what she saw. The following year, the KNP Complex Fire and the Windy Fire added a further 2,261 to 3,637 large trees, another 3 to 5% of the global population. Together, across 2 fire seasons, between 13 and 19% of all mature giant sequoias on Earth. These trees had stood for 2,000 to 3,000 years. They survived the Ice Age, they survived logging. Neither their location inside protected national parks nor the thickness of their bark saved them. Soil temperatures in areas of complete combustion exceeded the germination threshold for seeds. The seedlings that appeared afterward faced summer heat anomalies for which their lineage carries no adaptation whatsoever. The fire that reproduced the species for millennia is now destroying it, because the fire has changed, and the species has not had time to catch up. The answer lies partly in the geological record. Deposits from the Cretaceous period show that ancestors of the sequoia were distributed not only across North America, but also across Europe, Asia, New Zealand, and Australia. The Ice Age destroyed them everywhere except a narrow strip of the Sierra Nevada. When Patrick Matthew pressed seeds into Perthshire soil in 1853, he was technically returning the species to a place where its ancestors had grown millions of years before. The climate confirmed it. The sequoia's native range has a montane Mediterranean character, a long dry summer drought, abundant winter precipitation in the form of snow. Young trees have a shallow root system that spreads wide rather than deep, and they survive only where soil retains moisture through the dry months. This is precisely where everything breaks down in the Sierra Nevada. Drought takes away that moisture. The seedling does not survive. Scotland provides the opposite. Between 1,500 and 3,000 millimeters of rainfall per year, spread evenly across 4 seasons. No prolonged summer drought. The acid soils of the uplands retain moisture in deeper layers even during dry spells. For a young tree whose first decade determines everything, this means one thing: water is there when it is needed. But here begins a contradiction that cannot be sidestepped. The giant sequoia is not formally a native species of Britain, even though its ancestors grew here. Planted at large scale, it creates deep shade, alters soil biology, and displaces native ground cover. Land in Scotland is limited. There are serious arguments that it should be directed toward restoring the Caledonian pine forest and the Atlantic oak woodland, ecosystems that genuinely belong here. And there is one further complication, which Benmore itself serves to illustrate. The very climate that makes these trees possible simultaneously creates the conditions under which they can die. Increasingly wet winters waterlog the soil, and a team of horticulturists pumps a geo-injector beneath the avenue so the trees can breathe. Success and threat here are the same phenomenon in different doses. Assisted migration offers no guarantees. It offers less bad options. In August 2025, the Garnet Fire approached McKinley Grove in California. The giant Sequoia Lands Coalition directed everything it had toward the grove. Sprinkler systems, helicopters carrying retardant, specialist tree climbers who ascended into the trees to protect them by hand. The grove was saved, but this is no longer an exception. This is the new normal. Since the coalition's founding, its members have carried out restoration work across 23,251 acres in 44 of the 94 groves and planted more than 682,000 native trees where natural recovery no longer happens on its own. On the other side of the Atlantic, the Great Reserve is planting 1,540 giant sequoias near Abergavenny in Wales, with a goal of 100,000 trees across the United Kingdom by 2030.